I am aware I look a complete mess making these videos, and especially right now, but I'm going to be comparing two phones, one of which I've owned myself, another one that's fairly similar and lots of my friends have owned and used because they're so popular. This is the iPhone 5, the one I owned, versus the 5S, which is possibly the most popular iPhone that's ever been made. Now I'm going to start off with saying that these are fairly competitive in terms of the price. For the 5S you're getting about £150 to £160, and for the equally sized 5 you're going for about £100 to £120. So really there's not a huge jump in price considering the differences these two have. Now there are a hell of a lot of similarities that they have as well. They share a lot of things, including the design. I'm gonna just get this bit out the way. The design is almost the same. It's exactly the same dimensions, including the weight. The weight is, a big factor, and they both weigh the same, and literally they are the same dimensions in all three ways. So from the outside, you may be thinking, wow, they must be pretty similar then. Well, there are only three main physical attributes to the outside that at a distance you can kind of tell the difference between the two. Number one is the iPhone 5, the one before the 5S, only came in slate grey and white/silver. Now with the 5S you're getting space grey, which is different because the slate grey is kind of more of a black and the space grey is more of a grey kind of colour. You're getting that, you're getting the white/silver again, which would be the similar kind of colour, but you're also getting gold, which you weren't able to get in the 5. And also the 5S does have Touch ID, which means there isn't a logo on the home button, where the 5 didn't have Touch ID, and it did have that little kind of square, rounded square kind of logo on the button, which does distinguish it. And there's literally one tiny little detail that I've kind of picked up on, and I'm not sure if it's that easy to spot, but with the 5 you're not getting dual tone flash, you're getting a single tone. So if you look at the flash, it's more of a circle, whereas on the 5S it's more kind of oval or oblong, and actually what it really is it's two different colours, so it's two tones. Other things that they share then, well, they share the ports/I/O, so you're getting the lightning connector and 3.5 jack. I know, these phones have jacks on them. Not like the iPhone 7 does, They share the same kind of button layout on the edges, they share the same chamfered edges, they share the same screen in terms of the technology as well as the actual resolution and size as well. They both share 1GB of RAM. The difference is the 5 has DDR2 and the 5S has DDR3, which is a little bit quicker, but apart from that they both have 1GB of RAM as well. And the other thing that they have in common is they both come in the same storage capacities, 16GB, 32GB, and of course 64GB. No 128GB was kind of available in either of these phones. It was 16, 32 and 64, so they're fairly close. You were getting doubled every time, but it wasn't huge, massive amounts of storage considering there isn't any expandable storage physically via microSD or anything like that. The iPhone 5 came out in 2012 and the 5S came out at roughly the same time, but in 2013, so about a year on. And you can definitely tell the difference here. One of the huge differences, and the real reason I would never buy an iPhone 5/5C now, is because the 5S is 64-bit, where everything else is 64-bit. The App Store is going to become 64-bit entirely, and the 5 is going to be killed off. The 5S has still got a few years to go, because of course they're still supporting even the iPhone 4S, so this has got an extra 2 years on that. At the same time, again, it is 64-bit, so it's going to be able to kind of keep up with the others in terms of its architecture. You're also getting 1GB of RAM and that dual-core chip as well, which is awesome. And that's why I would definitely go with the 5S over the 5. One of the huge differences, again, Touch ID. Lots of people want fingerprint scanners in phones, and to be fair, although it's not the fastest in the world, Touch ID is actually pretty good, especially on the 5S, where it started out. It's actually the same as the one on the SE. They never upgraded it for the SE, so if you're looking at maybe a comparison between those two, and hopefully I'll do a comparison between those two later on, then you are going to be getting roughly the same in terms of speed in Touch ID. Decently accurate, and again, it's a fingerprint scanner. In a phone this cheap and this old, that's actually kind of a bonus. The screens themselves are really good quality, you're getting great screens. Obviously they're pretty low resolution, but their PPI makes up for it. You're not going for 500 plus PPI, it's a low 300 PPI, pixels per inch. And it shows that you really don't need such a high-end, really kind of expensive and battery draining, high-resolution display on something this small, because the quality of the picture is great for watching things, playing things, just general everyday use as well. It's really good. I don't get why a lot of Android users hate on PPI. I'm a huge Android user myself, I wouldn't really go back to an iPhone as a daily, but at the same time, I really do understand why Apple goes for these kind of slightly lower spec devices, because, in most cases, it makes the phone better because it doesn't have to drive so hard in terms of its performance, which means that it can, you're getting a higher FPS instead of higher resolution. You're able to save battery, although in this model, I'll get into it, the battery's not the best. And it just shows that you really don't need such an expensive to make and high-end kind of display when you can go with something like this, and it still looks crystal. This is a Retina display, of course. The cameras then, they're a little bit different. On spec and on paper, if you didn't really look into the details, they look fairly similar. You're getting 8 megapixel sensors on both, so no 4K video here, unfortunately. They're both able to shoot 1080p at 30 FPS. But the difference in video here is that the 5S can shoot 720p at 120 FPS, which is pretty cool. Come off that. That's much better than the 60 FPS 720p of the iPhone 5. You're getting double the frame rate, which means you can get some cool slow motion clips. Also, the video and photos tend to come out better on the 5S compared to the 5. Not really sure why this is. I'm not a huge camera expert. I'm a camera geek. I love my cameras. I'm staring into like a decent camera that I've kind of built upon myself. But again, I don't really know the scientifics behind it, but it turns out the 5S just comes out with much better photos than the 5 for some reason. Both are going to be good cameras, don't get me wrong. You're better off going with these instead of going with the same price newer phones because they tend to skimp on the cameras. Back in the day, these two phones were very expensive, and so you're going to be getting the high-end quality cameras of those. Again, no 4K, but that's a bit of a downer. Front-facing cameras are 1.2 megapixels, which are pretty good for taking selfies and Snapchats and stuff, but you're not going to be making vlogs or films on this. So in the iPhone 5, you're going to be getting an Apple A6 chip, which is a dual-core chip, which is still fairly good. But in the 5S, you're getting an A7, which again is like one number difference. What about that? Same, they both got dual cores, but the A7 is 64-bit, which doesn't seem to make a huge amount of difference in terms of just the way you say it. It doesn't sound very impressive, does it? But the 64-bit will mean a hell of a lot because everything is transitioned over to 64-bit in terms of the App Store will slowly get rid of 32-bit apps and it's all going to become 64-bit. Again, this is going to be not very good in terms of support for the older devices, but the 5S is still pretty old now. We've got the iPhone 7, which means it's gone 5S, 6, 6S, and now we're on 7. So that's like a 4-generation gap, which to be fair is pretty good in terms of support considering the 4S is still supported. They both have 1GB of RAM, again like I said, and to be fair, the overall usefulness and performance of both these phones is great. Even the iPhone 5 is great for everyday use, using Facebook, Twitter, every app is still integrated into it and works flawlessly. I've never had a crash with an iPhone 5, which is strange considering the 5s were kind of prone to crashing. I never had a problem with it, and apparently the 5S is just as good in terms of not crashing or anything. Battery life is a huge factor here. The 5 gets much better battery life than the 5S nowadays. I think it's due to just the fact that the 5S was much more powerful but didn't really have such a big battery. I mean, these specs are fairly similar, but the more powerful chip kind of eats away more and is a bit less power efficient, I'd say. Now, I'm going to say one thing. If you've got a phone this small, it literally takes up no bulk. It would be dwarfed by the S7 Edge and especially the new iPhones as well, the 6S and 7, which means that you've got all that space to kind of play with. If you want to put a battery case on this, I would recommend that because you're going to be getting obviously more battery life because you've got that extra battery, and it doesn't add too much bulk considering the phone is so small and definitely so thin as well. You're going to be getting more ergonomic kind of use out of it because obviously you've got the case on, it's going to protect it more, and also it should add a rounded back. Most battery cases do this, so you're going to be getting a pretty awesome kind of ergonomic change to the phone. It's going to curve more in your hand, it's going to feel a little bit more natural, although I do like the feel in the hand of such a small phone because it is so small. I would never have one personally because of the amount of media I consume and the fact that I've got kind of not huge but fairly big clumsy thumbs and they don't really work on typing on such a small screen. If you are a young kid, if you are maybe between the ages of about 12 and 16 and you want a phone that's kind of maybe your first iPhone, maybe your first smartphone, parents, if you're watching, whatever, this is a great phone because it introduces, people into having smartphones. Again, 10 to 16. Again, I don't really know because I didn't get my first smartphone for like a bit longer on, so maybe 14 or 15, and so this was like a bit different, but nowadays, younger kids are getting into it and stuff, so definitely a great first smartphone. If you're a lady or a girl and they, again, try not to generalize, but you guys tend to prefer iPhones because of just everything really, especially with the way that fashion is going. Guys like it as well. It's just like Apple is kind of a fashion statement. So maybe if you're into fashion or if you're into just having a small phone, you don't want a huge phone in your pocket, or you just like iPhones, you like small iPhones, because why not? They are great little phones. I would recommend this over the 5S. I may recommend the SE just considering it's got such a better spec, but I haven't checked that out, so don't quote me. I can't personally talk about that because I haven't used it. But with the 5S, I would definitely recommend that over the 5. Yes, you're spending a little bit more money, but you're getting something that's going to last longer, something that's got a much better camera, and something that's a little bit more powerful and is going to have more access to more of the apps in the future, if and when Apple want to take down their App Store for 32-bit customers. Again, would personally go for something like an S7 or just a bigger iPhone, but I want to thank you guys for watching. This has overall been a pretty decent comparison. I love the 5, I had one for a while, and I love the 5S. Lots of my friends have the 5S. Actually, there was a point where in my IT class, there were about 4 or 5 people at once having, an iPhone 5S, which is kind of strange considering we're all techies and most of us have Android phones, but the 5S is so popular that you can recommend it. It's fairly easy to fix if something does go wrong, and overall I would recommend this. The build quality is great, the feel in the hand is great, and it's much better going with something like a 5S instead of going for a similarly priced new phone, because the newer phone is going to be lower end because of course it's a low price. When the 5S came out it was around £500, now it's 150. You're just going to be getting a higher end quality device. So thanks for watching, guys. It's been your boy Ryan Thomas. I will see you next week, and hopefully we can kind of address the fact that most of my videos have become a little bit more boring. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.